once he's kind of covered off his introduction. So there aren't any reports this meeting, but there are some presentations, and those presentations will be available and circulated after the meeting by Debbie, our clerk here. So first of all, can I ask members to look at the minutes and let me know if members agree the minutes of the meeting was held on the 18th of July 2022. Members agree? Councillor Orford?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Orford, you said that you had some questions about the meeting.
I do indeed. This is meant to be a housing and homeless policy and accountability committee. Our role is to scrutinise, among other things, both officers and the cabinet member. It is impossible to scrutinise without any papers. It is also extremely discourteous to us. And I think you will find that you're in breach of the Local Government Access to Information Act 1985, which papers should be provided to the members of the public at least 3 days beforehand, and certainly members. You are expecting us to do due diligence and scrutinise officers and the cabinet member with no information. That is not acceptable. I think that you are seriously in breach of regulations, and I have written to the monitoring officer because I am so concerned about whether this committee is even legal, but we should be, and it is not acceptable for officers or whoever has decided to disrespect the committee members by not giving them any information. Expecting us to scrutinise from a presentation is, as I've said, unacceptable. And I hope that is noted and minuted.
Can we note that, please? Debbie, could we also ask governance to have a look into that act and please advise the committee?
Okay.
If that's the situation, and we need to ensure that.
I would also make clear that there are serious matters that are not even being addressed. I would be taking them up with Mr. Lothian if it's mentioned in his presentation. If it's not, I would be taking it up still. Because quite frankly, this is not a scrutiny panel. This is not an accountability panel. This is just where we have to sit and be lectured to.
Debbie, it'd be useful, in fact, after the meeting, if we could have a short statement on where we stand with this, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I ask Mark Lothian, who is the Director of Housing Transformation, interim or
interim Director of Housing Transformation?
Interim Director of Housing Transformation to begin the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair, and looking forward to talking to you tonight. My name is Mark Lothian. I'm the Interim Director of Housing Transformation, and gives me great pleasure to be with you this evening. I've been working with the council for just coming up to 2 months now, so I think it's good to share with you some of my early thoughts, perspectives, priorities, and to introduce it to you this evening with colleagues that are with me, that are delivering 3 presentations after my introductory presentation. So I'd just like to sort of introduce you to, on my right, we've got Lucy Barker and Jerry Crowley. On my left, we've got what's your name again? Richard Buckley. And hiding behind we've got Colette Pryor. And I think if there's any sort of individual cases that you'd like recorded for us to take away, please have a word with Colette, and she'll kindly take note of any individual cases rather than do that during the meeting. So we've got these presentations to you for this evening. I think it's fair to say that this is my first committee like this, and I understand that previous discussions about the repairs service have been had. You've had briefings about the repairs service. So what I'm bringing to you this evening is an update on the position that you were was presented to you in July, and really to advise that we're in a position to talk through with you. That's Richard and myself, to talk through with you some of the really tangible and positive steps that have been taken, and I'm pleased to say that these are already starting to have a good impact on our repair service. But as I said, you know, sort of 2 months in, I've been asked to, as a fresh pair of eyes, if you like, to review the progress and to work with colleagues and councillors to accelerate changes on this journey. And from that, I'll be able to report back to you in far more detail at a future meeting. So the reports on keeping residents safe and developing our capital programme all interlink with improving residents' home, and over time help to reduce the demand on our day-to-day repairs service. A little bit about me. In terms of my introduction, I joined the council in September, and I've worked in housing for local authorities and housing associations in quite a number of places, including South Yorkshire, Norfolk, East Midlands, West Midlands, and even briefly in Dumfries. And I've worked in housing for a few decades. I won't tell you how many decades, but I've had the privilege of seeing some fantastic services. But I've also gained really good experience from organisations that perhaps didn't achieve their ambitions. And I think all that's been fantastic experience, great learning for me, and which I hope will be useful in the context of the ambition, the really strong ambition to deliver great services for Hammersmith and Fulham. When I'm not working, I quite enjoy mountain walking, and I've recently adopted with my wife a pointer hound from Cyprus during the lockdown periods, and a combination of Darcy the dog and getting out walking when I can keeps me fit and active. So that's a little bit about me. So 2 months in, I can already see there's a great deal to celebrate about how the council works in partnership with residents, and I've been delighted to have been warmly welcomed by staff, councillors, and resident representatives who have been pretty candid and honest with me on what's working well and areas where we could perhaps do better. And it reminds me why agreeing what we can do today or tomorrow through partnership achieves so much more for communities than perhaps worrying or focusing on the past. And I hope the presentations this evening show that we really need our delivery partners to help us meet our housing need and help us to deliver great services. But I've also been really impressed with how residents have approached situations with officers and councillors, working collaboratively, respectfully, constructively to find solutions together, and bringing the voice of the customer to help influence better decision making, and to help us improve our services. So in my view, tonight's meeting is just one opportunity to share thoughts and ideas. But one of our core values is to do things with residents and not to them. And this is the responsibility of all officers, not just those here tonight, not just those working directly with residents. We want the voices of our residents to be clearly listened to and heard. We're very ambitious for our housing service and to ensure that we meet residents' expectations. But I've also noticed, in terms of early perceptions, that our housing service, to quote a proverb, I think sometimes hides its light under a bushel. And I hope we can start actively promoting services which are working well, delivering great outcomes for residents, and about which we should highlight and celebrate more than we perhaps do. And two areas we are working hard to deliver on is increasing our digital offer for housing services and increasing the visibility of housing teams on our estates, at shelter schemes and small blocks and street properties. Involving residents as part of the council's wider commitment to supporting connected communities across the borough. And never has this been more important than during the pandemic and now as we face a cost of living crisis across the UK. So I'd like to take this opportunity to express thanks to every resident who collaborates with us. I look forward to meeting more of you in the coming weeks and months. And I'll now hand over to Lucy and Jerry to give you a briefing about homelessness and partnerships, a range of services we can be enormously proud. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Mark. Can I ask that we take some questions in between the various presentations? Does anybody have any questions immediately for Mark?
Yes.
Councillor Morton, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I first of all welcome you to the council to the operation, and your experience sounds extremely useful, and from the dealings I've had with you today, and full of optimism. I'm afraid I must endorse and support Councillor Alford's concerns over the lack of hard information, particularly in light of the current circumstances which a lot of our residents are going to find with a £20 a week increase in rents and the general likelihood of increased homelessness because of unaffordable rents. I mean, this morning it was announced, I think it was £2,400 a month typical rent in London, which just seems to me completely unaffordable. So my concern was that this is a very important PAC meeting. I just think we've missed a bit of an opportunity to cover some very important information and updates, but we are where we are with that. So thank you very much for your presentation, and look forward to seeing what Jerry has to say.
Councillor Morton, we've been asked to bring the budgets and the HRA to PAC in January, and I'm expecting a report on that then. Councillor Alford.
Well, yes, if we're on the HRA, that will be the budget pack, won't it, in January?
Yes.
Well, that will be for the next year's HRA. Nothing is being addressed about this year's, the gaping hole, the fact that the rents are now going up with very little consultation. This is what should be brought to this sort of meeting to discuss and to explain why it's necessary. We don't know. I have been asking, and Mr. Logan hasn't even mentioned it, the HRA, what the savings have to be. At the beginning of the year, it was 3.8 million. There has been no explanation. And then all we suddenly learn is, oh, we're putting the rents up and the service charges. Everybody is aware there is a cost of living crisis. To do that mid-year, 2 increases in 1 year is appalling. And for the officers and cabinet member not to have the thought to bring it to a PAC to be scrutinised, because quite frankly, it appears you're trying to hide something. We don't know what. If it's open and above, that's fair government. Otherwise, no. And it is not doing things with residents, it's doing to them.
Well, Councillor Alford, can I ask that we note in the minutes that the committee would like to see a full housing revenue account in January with the budget, and we'd like to see that back.
But you're missing the point that we're still.
I'm really not missing the point.
In other words,
but I understand.
You are quite determined to brush it under the carpet.
Well, we do not have a housing revenue report to go through at this meeting, but we will have one at the next meeting.
And
So
I have been raised
let's cover it then.
I have raised it on several occasions, and you know that. But I'll go on, and I'm afraid, Mr. Lothian, you've been misinformed about something. You talk about the repairs that was briefed at the last meeting. It didn't start on time, the meeting. Mr. Bean was an excellent officer, had only 20 minutes, if that, to do his briefing and allowed 1 minute for questions. That is hardly, again, proper accountability. So I would have hoped that at this report, we would have had a decent written report about the. I'm not criticising Mr. Buckley personally, please don't think that, but it is the lack of report. And again, I'm afraid if you think there's an improvement, I've raised with Mr. Buckley, and I'll raise it with you now. Well, you and I did a walkabout.
Councillor Alford,
No,
can I ask
I'm
you
sorry.
have a question?
Yes, I am.
Could you,
Why?
could you please get to your question?
I will.
Thank
Why
you.
is the Chasemore house lights still not being bothered to be repaired?
Okay, Councillor Alford, I'm sorry, perhaps Collect Prior can help you with that particular issue. I really want to get back to the agenda that we do have. And
Well, I've got more questions, but let somebody else ask some questions, and I'll go back to asking questions.
Mark, you have something you'd like to say?
Answer specifically. I apologise if previously the opportunity to fully scrutinise and debate an important service, the repair service, was perhaps, you know, time limited. That's not what I want to do. That's not the style and approach that.
Mark, just one moment. Councillor Alford knows that we had the PAC meeting last time was on the same date as the cabinet meeting, and the same report was going to both meetings. So we only had the first half hour of our meeting, and we had guests arriving, and it was nothing to do with officers.
I never said it was to do with this. I said that Mr. Bean was an excellent officer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not any attack an officer.
The only point I'm trying to make is that in terms of the style and approach of the current administration, the executive, we want to be open and transparent and share information. I hope that the presentations on keeping people safe and the capital programme, of which there's a lot of information about the repair service, will show some of the work that we've been doing in to trying to improve the service, and there is a commitment to bring back a fuller report in due course. The presentation I'm sure, will be made available.
Yeah.
So it's not that you won't be going away with the officer's written or typed information with facts about the service areas, but there's a lot of information within the presentation. I just wanted to give you that assurance.
I think it would have been nice if had it in advance. But please carry on.
Thank you. May I ask you a question? You talked about working in lots of different places around the country, and I wondered if any of those areas you believed were best practice, and whether that was something that you were intending to bring, and what those best practice experience might be.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's not the first time I've been asked a similar question. You know, what can you bring from elsewhere and inspire in a different organisation? And I think it's true to say that every organisation I've worked with have had a service improvement plan for part of their service or all their service, depending on the drivers, depending on the history, and depending on the political influence on that council. So I can't point to a housing organisation that's got it all right. It's an important service area. It's really hard to bring every service area up to 3-star. What I can say is the other aspect is that everybody's context and history is different. So actually, what I can say is that I know what good looks like across most services in housing, and I know what average looks like, and I know what poor looks like, and obviously the latter of those descriptions is often the impact on our customers, and what when customers say we're not being listened to, we're not getting the service that we think we pay for. So I know how to go about exploring and evaluating where I think we're up to, and I think there are services that are pretty good in currently being delivered, and I'm hoping you'll see that through the presentations. There are also services that we're aspiring to improve, And I think the compliance report that Richard will present to you about keeping people safe is also impressive. So I've also said in my presentation that I think we need to focus on the positive and promote ourselves a little better. So I'm not coming to you to say that I think with the experience I've got from elsewhere, I can come and cut and paste from another organisation. It doesn't work like that. But what I can say is that this type of scrutiny, conversation, working in partnership delivers results. And I'm hoping that I'll inspire colleagues and people around me to want to see services across the piece in Hammersmith and Fulham as brilliant as we can get them.
Thank you. Can I say that I understand it's been a very long pathway here that we can go back sort of decades to how we've got to the position that we're at, and I would really appreciate a kind of commitment to look at how we got to where we're at, as well as let's learn some lessons from the past if we can, please. Councillor Alexander, do you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a couple of few questions. Firstly, is for David, welcome to Fulham and Hammersmith. It's a great place, and we're very appreciative of somebody with the skills and talents who's willing to come, willing to learn, because we are in a city we're in the city part of the Europe's greatest metropolis, and we do have the good fortune that your right hand and your left hand man, that's Jay and Richard, are there. I have tons and tons of casework that heads both of their ways. I have to sit on residents' issues because I just can't possibly overload them any more than I already am. And it would just be, I don't want these fellas throwing things at me because they're, there are a lot of problems with that one. Now, moving on to the celebration stuff, I don't get many residents coming up in general terms and talking about the stuff, celebratory stuff and what we're doing right. When we fix a problem that we shouldn't have got wrong in the first place, I get fantastic praise and the officers get the praise as well. But really, we shouldn't be getting that praise, because if we'd done it right in the first time, we wouldn't have had to take it up at a later date t-shirt. So you're just I won't say cutting your teeth, because you're obviously very experienced at your job. So I'm going to hold back on more of the questions, but I'm listening very attentively to this celebrations and this visibility and the involvement of local residents, because as a third generation Fulhamite, we've kind of heard some of these things before, and it can be great, but it can also be a nemesis that comes to bite us back again when we say, well, we're doing these weapons, we're going to celebrate, and then people get a wheelbarrow, a cement lorry, an Arctic lorry, a ship full of problems, and they dump them on my lap. So that's more difficult. I'll just finally get back to the thank you very much for joining us and welcome, and we look forward to working with you. And remember, it's Fulham and Hammersmith.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Can we move on to our next presentation, which is the Homelessness Partnership update. Now, this is something we asked back at the last meeting. Simone and Lucy and Jerry, there was a presentation at the last meeting, a report, and we asked to do something of a review on that. So thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you, Chair. Just by way of introduction, my name is Jerry Crawley. I'm the head of housing allocations and lettings here at Hammersmith and Fulham, and that includes the procurement, provision and management of emergency and temporary accommodation, which we'll cover here during the slides tonight.
Good evening, I'm Lucy Baker and I'm the Prevention and Rough Sleeping Commissioner. Commission a number of services to support rough sleepers away from the streets, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the services after Jerry.
So we wanted to come tonight to give a short presentation. It's only 15 minutes presentation, just to give give a little view of basically what the homelessness demand looks like across the borough, and provide some reassurance in regards to meeting that demand. What our temporary accommodation provision looks like, which is crucially important when facing that demand, and indeed the excellent work which is happening with some of our more complex and entrenched homeless households. So I'd like to start with some successes. We touched on it earlier on. We don't probably spend enough time highlighting some of our successes here at Hammersmith and Fulham, of which we do have a lot to be proud of. Just in regards to starting off in regards to temporary accommodation, we've got an excellent, well regarded across West London, probably one of the best property procurement teams across West London, which is crucial if we are to provide and procure good quality, good standard, affordable temporary accommodation, which is required to meet that demand. And now that team has been so successful, they have procured over 1,000 units of accommodation in the last just over 2 years, which goes to meet that demand. Another particular point that we are extremely proud of, and rightly so here in Hammersmith and Fulham, because it does buckle the trend across London, is our position of having no families in unsuitable bed and breakfast type accommodation. And we haven't had so for almost 5 years now, which doesn't mean we can rest on that laurel. We have to work at it every day, every week to maintain that position.
Thank you. We also continue to have low levels of rough sleeping in Hammersmith and Fulham, which for an inner London borough is really great. That work is hard work. It continues, some of it continues through some additional funding that we received from the Department of Levelling Up, a 3-year programme, the Rough Sleeping Initiative, which has helped us secure 20-bed rough sleeper assessment hub in the borough and some essential support staff. And that's enabling us to move people away from the streets quickly and on the pathway away from homelessness. That's obviously in addition to the council's commissioned services, hostels and other services that we have. I'm pleased also to say that we are just on the verge of signing for some additional funding through the Rough Sleeping Accommodation Programme. That is money that comes via the GLA to us to support one of our key programmes that was highlighted in the commission involving ending rough sleeping back in 2018, I believe, which was for the council to develop a Housing First programme. And Housing First enables us to deliver self-contained, secure accommodation to people with very, very complex and entrenched rough sleeping histories. It started off as a pilot of 5 units, it grew to 19, and with this additional funding of 12 units, we hope that by the end of the financial year, that will grow to a total of 31, which would make it one of the largest Housing First programmes, certainly in London. And then furthermore, from a prevention angle, obviously we work in very close partnership with a range of partners to help us prevent homelessness wherever possible and enable people to stay in their tenancies, including advice on debt, welfare, helping people with rent arrears, addressing antisocial behaviour. And obviously that prevention work can only happen because of the partnerships that we have and the work that we do across a range, not just within the council, but externally as well, to support people to remain in their homes.
So just a little bit about the challenges. Our front house housing prevention service provides advice and support to over 1,000 homelessness applications each and every year. And as mentioned earlier in the meeting, there is an absolute real risk that this demand will indeed increase, fueled by the cost of living crisis, and indeed some other factors such as the end of court evictions which obviously was in evictions moratorium was in place during the lockdown, which is now ended, and those cases are perhaps working their way through the courts system. And in addition to that, then we have very much reported contracting private rented market, which also feeds into that challenge.
There has been an increase in homelessness approaches. If we compare Q2, July to September this year, it was 12% higher than it was in the previous summer. And there are further pressures on housing, not only with the cost of living, as has been mentioned, but also with increasing pressure to support, as we're very proud to do, of course, providing housing and support to refugees, first of all, people from Afghanistan and latterly Ukraine. So we're not complacent. We are ready to face that demand, that increase in demand, and we hope that our excellent services will continue to shine as we help to prevent and relieve as much homelessness as possible. Rough sleeping in London has also increased this summer by 24% across London as compared to the previous summer, July 2021. And that has been reflected. There has been an increase in rough sleeping locally too. But I must assure you in that vast majority of rough sleepers do not spend more than 1 or 2 nights on the street. We have excellent services to respond very quickly to everyone that we find and support them into some accommodation or alternative option away from the streets. Some people, of course, are not necessarily Hammersmith and Fulham residents becoming homeless, where we might know about them through our housing solutions service, but they're certainly picked up in the borough, and we do everything we can to help them on their onward journey. So again, our services are robust and ready to deal with this increase. In October, it has dropped again a little bit, which was good. It's possibly sometimes we see rough sleeping might increase. We had an extremely hot summer, and where people are living in overcrowded conditions, tensions can perhaps build, can be very hot in people's accommodation, and we think that more people were perhaps sleeping out as a result of that. And we are now, as the weather cools off, starting to see a dip, which is usual. But yeah, so it's tough work, but we're ready to face any challenges that come with rough sleeping.
Just a quick snapshot of what our temporary accommodation portfolio looks like. As you can see, we've got a total of 1,160 units which we use as temporary accommodation. And this provides a breakdown of that. The first thing that I'd probably say is that you can see straight off that it's a mixed property portfolio. So the first 2 lines obviously account for the majority. You can see the top one there, 400, which is privately owned self-contained accommodation leased directly to the council on long-term leases, followed up by 490 units, which are again privately owned, leased through a management agent or property agent to the council, which tend to have shorter leases. And those 490 is spread over about 20 plus agencies. So we're not over reliant on one provider, which would leave us exposed to some risks there. We've got 5 council-owned homeless hostels, making up 64 units. We use 57 units of our own permanent stock. And we lease 46 privately owned through housing associations. We use bed and breakfast for single people or for couples. These use emergency short term. We've got 103 there, and that fluctuates depending upon demand. So just about what that demand looks like into temporary accommodation and the private rented sector. So you can see there, I've put up here some stats going back to 2017, 2018, 19, where we started at a high point of 1,400 households. We're very proud here in Hammersmith and Fulham the work that we do in reducing temporary accommodation. You can see there 3 years from 2019 to 21-22, we've gradually reduced to about 23% reduction. And again, that buckled the London trends, all the hard work that was going into it. Right up to April of this year, we were down to just 1,110 household units. Since April, since the beginning of this financial year, we've seen a rise in temporary accommodation provision due to demand. The overall number rose by 5% up to where it currently is, that 1,160 that we've showed on the previous slide. And the projections here are straight line projections. So the households in TA, if there was no intervention, you could see the direction of travel going back up to 2017-18 figures. And also the procurement of private rented sector properties, which is extremely important in managing the numbers and keeping the numbers low in temporary accommodation. But hopefully, and I'll go through some actions we're taking, hopefully provide some reassurance that we don't arrive back at those high points in temporary accommodation. It's something we're looking to avoid. This is just a table, a comparative data set. Just go back to, so it's over a 6-month period, starting from 22-23. So the first 6 months of this financial year, you can see there that over that period, 6-month period, we placed 207 households into temporary accommodation, an average of 7.9 a week. And then we've got the same period going back for the last 3 years. Now, interesting enough, if you take out the 2021, which was when lockdown started, that was pretty much the 12-month lockdown period, where you can see numbers really dipped. Actually, they've been fairly stagnant. In fact, we've had a reduction this year in comparison to last year. So we know that the placements into TA are stagnant, if not slightly reduced, although to say, you know, we wouldn't want to rest on that, that could change literally in a month. Just on the right-hand side there, I've just put the details of the figures in for the various years. Again, you can see back to 2018, the high point of 1454, right down to 1,110, where we were at April this year, in fact. Pressures impacting TA, temporary accommodation provision, of which there are absolutely pressures, and they are growing. So we've seen some increases in demand mentioned before, but even the demand is starting, it looks very different to where it was perhaps some years ago. We're seeing now the demand includes provision around the Syrian refugee resettlements and the Afghan resettlement programs, as well as the Ukraine refugee resettlements. In addition to that, also driving demand is single homelessness, where we may not have a statutory duty to provide accommodation, but we do, because it's a priority for Hammersmith and Fulham to eradicate rough sleeping in the borough. So it's really important to us. Private rented sector market, again, I mentioned before, it's a contracting market, particularly in London. Some stats report as much as 30% down on the year before. And of course, with falling supply tends to be a rise in costs for that supply then. So which provides then this affordability challenge. We're seeing some parts of London increases of 12% on rents. And of course, growing cost of living presents a risk in regards to tenancy sustainment, which then places further demand on the local authority. One of the other pressures in regards to temporary accommodation is perhaps reduction in supply of social housing this year. We've been very fortunate the last few years. We've had some really big developments in the borough, and that's key for move on out of temporary accommodation, which we haven't yet had this financial year, although there are some in the pipeline. And then just regards our TA placement procurement strategy, as mentioned before, you know, we avoid bed and breakfast type accommodation for families. We also avoid what a lot of other local authorities, particularly in London, use what we refer to as costly, very costly nightly accommodation, where you place night by night on a daily basis, of which there is literally no security of tenure. And we also prioritize in-borough procurement for temporary accommodation. Very, very difficult, very challenging. If we can't get in borough, we move to West London and work out from there, but always within the M25 area. We don't go outside of M25 area. So in regards to mitigation and a temporary accommodation provision management plan, well, obviously we're working with contractors here in the borough to turn around voids faster, thus increasing the supply of move on. And a plan is in place to reduce the number of void social housing units in the borough. We're also working very closely with our current portfolio landlords, of which we have many, to increase the supply there, but also looking to secure new supply. And so some things we've been doing, we've been going to landlord forums, we've been contacting leaseholders who own their properties in the borough. We've been doing some publicity and marketing. Maximising grant funding essential. One of the funding streams we've secured is regarding vulnerable renters grant central government funding. And that basically assists us to, first and foremost, to prevent homelessness where there's a risk of loss of tenancy in the private rented sector, and also increase access to the private rented sector. Maximise any working partnerships that we have, in particular with capital letters. We work with 26 other local authorities to stimulate the procurement of private rented accommodation. Home Finder UK, who also provide social housing across London and the UK, and Beam, which help to provide private rented sector properties, but also work with homeless households to get them into working and training, which opens up housing options. And finally, just obviously, it all requires a robust homelessness and prevention activity. So we work very closely with our front of house colleagues, so we can identify where the demand is coming from and how complex that demand is. So we are ready to meet that demand, which includes rough sleeping provision, which Lucy will touch on.
Thank you. Employment, training and education opportunities for homeless people that live in our commissioned pathway. We touched on this at the last PAC, where one of our guests, Stuart Proudly from St Mungo's, was here. And ETE, as I shall refer it to from now on, is obviously really, really important to helping homeless people move away from rough sleeping, from homelessness, to build their independence, their self-confidence, find meaningful activity, engage with the community. And so it's a really important part of us helping move people away from homelessness for good. So I just highlighted here some of the referrals that we've had from our commissioned pathway. So we have 149 bed spaces in total, 129 are in our hostels, and then there are 20 rough sleeper beds. All of our services, the support is provided by St Mungo's. And so we can see that 13 referrals were made through their own recovery college and other internal courses that they offer, 5 into Beam, 6 into Get Connected, etc. So we have all sorts of things going on, from photography and work and learning. Employment training education is built into the support planning and regular key work that our residents have. And if people are not ready to make that step, then there are discussions about what they would like to do, perhaps developing hobbies or volunteering opportunities. And this is all really to get people ready, as I say, to move into independent living. It's a very complex client group that we're dealing with here, people with multiple entrenched long-term needs. But I'm pleased to say that through the council's further work that it plans to do with Beam for the remainder of this financial year, we're going to see get them into our hostels and see if there's any further referrals that can be generated through Beam. Touched briefly on some of the challenges that people face, not only with the sort of complex support needs, but also people's confidence about stepping into an educational or a work environment for the first time, perhaps in years or ever, and how it's so important to build their self-confidence, because people tell us that they feel different to others. They feel like they stick out, they feel like they don't belong. So we're working on their inclusivity and their ability to access more freely things they want to do with their lives. Residents also say to us that sometimes it's difficult to travel, perhaps they're juggling other appointments as well, or perhaps they lack the equipment to be able to attend a course or get involved, and that can even be as simple as the right type of clothing, so they feel more confident. So to help us address this, we're looking at bringing some of the ideas of the work and learning into our hostels so that residents don't need to travel, but they can perhaps test it, have a little taster session. We work with Groundswell, who provide peer support, who can accompany people to places, which is really important on a bus or on a tube or into that first classroom setting, for example. And we're also improving our access to funding, so developing a personalisation fund so that people can tap into the equipment that they need to make that a success. And then finally, at the last PAC, it was mentioned about the Get Connected pilot. This Get Connected is a programme that's run by Turning Point, who's our drug and alcohol service. And what we wanted to do was to bring Get Connected into the hostels to enable some people that perhaps engaged in street-based activity, for example, begging or street drinking, to do something else and do that in their own home in the hostel. So that has been designed with residents. There have been some sessions happening already and good sign up happening already. And the plan is for fortnightly taster sessions to happen, and some of the ideas that residents want is to look at things like self-defense, arts and crafts courses, and build your own bike. So that work has started, and we hope that it continues. It's been very successful so far. And then finally, I just wanted to talk briefly about the Homeless Health Project, which the council commissions. So through St Mungo's, we have a homeless health coordinator who's pictured in this photo here. And she does fantastic work bringing together health and homelessness, because they're so inextricably linked. When we think of the average age of death of a male rough sleeper is 47 and a female is 43, we can clearly see the link between health and homelessness. So a health action day was held in September, which brought NHS services into the hostel. And those included things like TB screening, COVID and flu vaccines, of course, hepatitis, liver scans, and there was cardio screening, oral health advice and mental health advice as well. It was a fantastic day. 43 of our hostel residents attended of the 149, which was excellent. And 5 staff attended as well, some of whom also had COVID and flu vaccines, which is great. It was a brilliant turnout and a real joint effort. We're hoping to hold another health action day in the middle of December. We're planning it at the moment. We're hoping to have podiatry services there as well, as some of the services I've previously mentioned have a little bit of a different offer for people as well. So we're really proud of it, and we hope that we have another 43 or more residents turn up in December as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That's amazing, having almost a third of people in hostel rooms going along to that. That's a brilliant piece of work. Thank you very much. Do committee members have any comments or questions?
Yeah. Joe, you mentioned about voids. Do you have any information on the percentage of voids of council property, and any way of tracking when they're coming back on the availability. I'm aware of a couple in my ward, which has been empty for getting on for nearly 3 years, and nothing seems to happen. So I just wondered if you tracked that.
Sure. I'd be very happy to take away any details of any properties you've got specific inquiries about. I haven't brought void data with me tonight. I do know that there is a void reduction plan in place, and that there is a void level that we're aiming to get to by the end of the financial year. But
Do you know as a percentage what that would be?
as a percentage by the end of the financial year, I believe we're working to 2%. And please let me know if details of any particular units.
So am I right in thinking that the void reduction plan is starting to work and it's increasing or decreasing the number of voids?
That's the hope. So we're really seeing some huge improvements around contractors
Yeah.
that council is using and performance around contractors.
Councillor Morton, would you like to see more on that at future meeting on void?
Yeah, I'll take that with Jerry, the ones that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be good information.
Councillor Alexander.
It's question to Jerry, but it's really to Richard. So I'll go through Jerry. It's quite right that you get these boards back into use as quickly as possible. And, you know, there are corners cut in the building works, but it gets somebody off the street, which is not your problem. It's his problem. But I think when you do a void, and in some instances, I've seen voids that have been decent home standardised in order to get somebody in there. And again, no criticism of that. We do need, after Jerry's sitting the void out, we do need a longer term recovery plan, because otherwise we've got people waiting 5-6 years when they've been moved into a void where there've been these sort of works done until a major program picks them up. There's nothing to pick up with them. So there's the hurry scurry to get the properties and get somebody off the street and in there is paramount. There's no one doing that. And there's, can't think of a better word than corner cut, but there must be a better word out there, because it sounds quite harsh, but there must be some recovery to take a longer look and see where, you know, they've got a leaking radiator, so the bloke's hit it a bit and he's twisting this and he's stopped it from leaking. That's great, but the residents then in there, and he's pulling out with his team, you know, every couple of weeks, and the door doesn't close properly, or they put they put a fire door that meets the minimum standard, but they changed the stock door with all the security locks, and they put a cheap fire door that meets the standard, and a pat on the head for those people. If you don't have a recovery program, it's costing us thousands, if not tens of thousands.
Councillor Alexander, I think that Richard might be covering off some of the kind of around asset surveys.
No, it's specifically to do with voids, where we've turned them around fast.
Right.
We then have a look to see how they now meet our corporate standards and that, because there's,
Yeah.
you know, there's nobody's going to say bad words for getting in there.
Sure,
I
sure.
get quite a bit of case
Yeah.
work from voids.
Well, there's no one more eager to get voids back into play than myself as head of allocations and lettings. I can reassure you, and it's not my area, but I can reassure you that there is a letting standard here operated by Hammersmith and Fulham.
The letting standard,
And it's
the Fulham standards are.
It's a letting standard that's
Very
been
good.
enhanced recently and it's been improved recently. And before voids are handed back for reletting, each and every one of them are surveyed to ensure that that standard is met. And if it isn't, it's returned to the contractor. And I'm sure Richard probably later on will talk about the investment in improving the
This is
stock.
where you're quite right, because you're getting that minimum standard to get somebody off the street. So that's great stuff. Now,
I'll touch on that when we.
but now we've got this sore thumb in a block where it's of a much lower standard than everything else in the block, even though it is the minimum standard, because the minimum standard and decent home standard, there's a huge difference.
Well, I'll answer it quickly now. So we have a very high level standard. Now, what we'll do is after this meeting, we'll circulate it. It's it's public. It's a very high standard, and as Jerry said, they're inspected independently after. And if there are any failings, then they're not accepted. And we've had a large number of those historically that weren't accepted. We brought on specialist contractors to turn that around, which is part of the void reduction plan. But we'll circulate that plan. But the key aspect of the voids is we endeavour over the next 5 years to do around about 5% of our stock is actually to upgrade. So many of our 50% of our property will be new kitchens, new bathrooms, etc. The idea is that will, once somebody moves in, there's no need for us to come back to us for repairs. So we're addressing that. It's not a short-term fix; it's a long-term fix.
Every property in our portfolio at some stage becomes a void.
Yes.
And the other programs that are improving can be their standards can be way ahead of these standards. And there is, if I had to disagree about something, I would say that the minimum letting standards, fine, it's safe, it does what it does, get somebody off the street, but it's not as good as the rest of our standards.
The question, but I'll circulate the electrical standard after, and I'd like to come back to that another time.
Thank you. Councillor Orford.
Yes, I would make a couple of points. I would take up on what Councillor Alexander's just said. I have actually asked for the void information. First of all, I get asked for freedom of information to provide the information. And I've just checked. Though I asked some considerable time ago, I will not be given the information on the 16th of November. That is hardly a swift response to councillors' inquiries. So I'm still interested about the voids and what we have and how long term they are. This is something that has to be considered, because if we want to start the voids to go back into the housing stock, but I'll leave that. I will now go on to the homelessness and the rough sleepers. How successful, because I know that these people have great needs and great problems, and therefore it is very hard for them to change their lifestyle. How successful are you? I mean, do you find that people do a rather revolving door, that they come into our hostels, we do everything we can for them, but they then, for whatever reason, go back on the streets? Or do you find that you prevent it entirely?
There'll be a great mix of reasons. So there's some people who successfully move on into their own homes. We have a generous quota on the housing register to support people into social housing, and then a wraparound package of support. The idea being that, people don't lose their tenancies and revolve back around again. I think what we're good at in Hammersmith and Fulham, if people do, for whatever reason, lose their hostel placement, that could be through a hospital admission, perhaps they've gone to prison, other reasons, that they don't come out of those institutions or those settings onto the streets again. We will continue to keep in touch with them and work with them and place them perhaps for a short period of time into temporary accommodation, whilst we then seek a further hostel placement for them. So the cycle may be within the hostel and temporary accommodation section rather than going back down onto the street itself and through. That's the vast majority of people would do that. Some people, of course, may return to the streets because they choose to do that, and some people we perhaps not in touch with them enough, and then see them rough sleeping again. But that will be a very, very small number of cases.
Thank you.
And then particularly about refugees, because at the moment we have a great many for various reasons.
Yeah.
What are you actually doing to move them on from, because I know they're in hotels and hotel and more in a hotel, aren't they, than in a hostel, or are they?
That's right, I believe so. I can't speak with much authority on the detail of those refugee schemes, and they are separate to the hostels that I commission. So I can come back to you with some information about that.
That would be very helpful, because they're obviously in a particularly vulnerable position, and one hopes that the standard of the hotel is reasonable.
Councillor Orford, I think I'm right in thinking that we have asylum seekers here at different stages. So
Yes,
we have a number in hotels with no recourse to public fund, where the funding comes from the Home Office. You're asking specifically about.
Well, I'm asking actually about the ones that are all sorts
the
of
responsibility of the council.
Well, the responsibility again, but also the different I hate to say different types of refugees, but there are people who come, as you say, no recourse to
Yeah.
public funds. We have the tragic Ukrainians who have come, and we're doing everything we can, I believe,
Yeah.
to facilitate them. And presumably, because they are coming quite often as heart families, will they be put into temporary accommodation rather than in hotels or hospitals?
I believe so. Jerry, you might know more than me about that.
So for the most part, it's like the Syrian and the Afghan refugee schemes, their Home Office sponsored and supports it. With the Ukraine one, it's Homes for Ukrainians, so they're placed with households
Yes.
in the bar. If that arrangement breaks down,
Yes.
we've got a dedicated team that works with those households to either establish a new placement with a new family, because I believe there was a waiting list of families that stepped up, and offered their homes as part of the Homes for Ukraine scheme. If that is unsuccessful, the local authority will always carry a statutory duty for any household that has recourse to public funds and is deemed to be vulnerable and with a housing need.
Councillor Orford, we have Linda Jackson sitting here. Linda, would you be able to answer this?
Council, but I'm Linda Jackson, Director of Social Care under Leave for Refugees for the council. So I can give you information if you want the full details.
I do.
Not a problem. Or we can come to this pack and do a presentation as well.
Thank you.
And a written one as well, please. Because while this has been a very interesting presentation, it would have been far more effective and far easier to scrutinise if we'd had some paperwork in advance, absorbing all these fingers from the. I've had to write notes, it is not an effective way of scrutinising. Very interesting, and you're obviously doing an excellent job. But it would be a great deal easier to scrutinise you if we could actually read the paperwork first and look at the figures and compare, rather than just having to look at the screen.
Thank you. Councillor Sadiq, do you have
Thank
any?
you, Chair. Thank you, Jerry and Lucy, for your excellent presentation, first of all. Sorry, Mark, I missed your introduction. I'll catch up from my colleagues, hopefully. I understand we have a big challenge at the moment for housing, rough sleeping and homelessness. But I have a short questions or clarifications. It's not like, because especially I start with the Lucy, homelessness. I understand you said is in London, there's a 24% homelessness, increased by 22 to 24%. Do you have any data for the Hammersmith and Fulham within the last 3 months? Is that anything directly related to the 60,000 migrants came within the last 3 months? Anything related, or just we have, the increased due to any other reasons? That's
So-
the first bit of my question.
Yeah, so I don't have it with me, but I can break down that specific information for you. So the increase is from the last summer, 2021, July, August, September, compared to this summer, where we've seen an increase locally, and that increase has been reflected, as I say, across London. For Hammersmith and Fulham, yes, we do have specific data on numbers. Some of the more granular detail about those individual cases, because some people are seen quite quickly and taken to a place of safety away from the streets. There would be sometimes quite a lot of casework needed in order to establish what their reason for hitting the streets was in the first place. Whether that's changed this summer, I can get you the detail, but historically our top 3 reasons for people rough sleeping have been loss of some form of private rented accommodation, because they've been asked to leave accommodation by friends or family they were staying with. So they were already homeless, but not necessarily rough sleeping, perhaps moving between friends and families. And the third one is relationship breakdown. A vast majority of rough sleepers are male, and that tends to be as part of a relationship breakdown, they then hit the streets. This summer, we've seen an increase in people that have not rough slept before, so they're new to the streets. From my readings of it, those seem to be the top 3 reasons again, but I'm happy to do a more detailed analysis for you. Sometimes it takes a little while for the granular detail of the casework to come through, but I can get that for you if you wish.
Thank you. for second bit of my question is for you. When we pick up the rough sleeper from the streets, do we have any basic standard for like the referral or checkup for the like mental health or other NHS? Do we do any basic assessment and then place them in the house, or have to place quickly?
Yeah, so our outreach team will talk to every rough sleeper that they meet. Part of that conversation will be about their health and their well-being. And depending on what setting they then go into, for example, into our rough sleeper assessment hub, they will then do a comprehensive assessment, including their health, support them to register with the GP, support them to access mental health services or whatever other services that they need. We also work with a team called RAMP, RAMHP, which is part of West London Mental Health Trust. They're specifically commissioned across Hammersmith and Fulham, Ealing and Hounslow to go out with our street outreach teams respectively. They're approved mental health practitioners and they're able to undertake detailed mental health assessments of people on the street. So that's been a really excellent and welcome additional resource for us to be able to get people with significant and mental health concerns the help they need straight away.
I'm just concerned because if the deaths are not due to the referral or necessity actions, it's increasing. That's why I was asking this question. And the second bit from Vijay, sorry, I'll be quick. Sure. You said there's a homelessness, the lots people are applying, and we have, I have residents approach them how they can get their application forms physically after the COVID. There's more like everything digital, and they don't know where to go and where to get the application form to fill in and send the application. And is there any point or anywhere where they can get physically applications?
Yeah.
Or easy way for them who can, especially if someone is a senior citizen, can't fill or they don't understand that technology. What's that sort of arrangements?
Yeah, there is still that option for paper forms. And if they want a paper form, they can get one from either one of the housing offices open in the borough. If you want me to get one to them, let me have their details and I'll make sure they have one. And if they want assistance in completing that, we can also provide assistance.
But probably that, I think if you remember, David, you sent me the one query as well.
Yes.
The same. You forwarded me.
Yeah, thank you. It's an important
Thanks.
question. Thank you very much. I'd just like to say that I understand that Section 21 no fault evictions are up or something like 20, 30%, 25%, something like that. So I realise that there's a great deal of pressure on the department now. So thank you for the work that you and your team are doing. We would like to continue to have reports on that situation as the cost of living crisis continues to bite. So thank you. I think next on our agenda is compliance update, keeping residents safe. And Richard Buckley is to present here. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure how long ago, but I'm Richard Buckley. I'm the Assistant Director for Residents and Building Safety. And I'll touch on repairs during this presentation as well as talking about compliance. It would be useful to update the committee on the compliance, which often goes on in the background without much promotion or advertisement to the committee. I think it's been useful to sort of give an understanding of the scale of what goes on in the background. So as a landlord, we have a legal duty to repair, provide safe housing, and there's much legislation and post-Grenfell tragedies of additional requirements to us as a landlord. You'll see we have over 12,000 tenanted properties, but we still have a responsibility to all our residents and leaseholders. So we have many expert teams who are specialists in their particular subjects, and one of the areas that covers gas safety in relation to explosions and carbon monoxide poisoning. We have over 11,000 gas appliances, which we inspect every year. We do checks, and we have a rolling program on a 10-month basis, and allowing us a 2-month gap to address any issues around access. And we're currently running at just under 100%, around about 3 or 4 cases, which we have, which we're trying to access at the moment, which we try and work with relevant stakeholders, or we take action through the courts. And we've managed to maintain a very high level of success, even during the COVID period. Electrical safety, again, in the private sector, there's a requirement to undertake electrical installation condition reports of the hard wiring in flats and communal areas every 5 years. That doesn't apply to local authorities, but we apply the same to us as best practice, and we have a very high success rate. We aim to inspect over 3,000 homes per year, and a large part of that, following changes in regulations back in 2018, means that we're upgrading the consumer units and the hard wiring within all our stock, which reduces repairs in the future and makes everything safer, especially in terms of fire safety and electric shock. So that's what's going on in the background. Fire safety management is a big part of what we do, and we have some sort of unique things that happen in Hammersmith and Fulham. We have a residents action group, which is chaired and made up of residents, mainly the majority who live in tower blocks, and they work with us in terms of shaping the policy. We have transparency. We provide them with monthly compliance figures across all areas of health and safety, and we're working on them and developing strategies in relation to their particular blocks, which is a requirement of the new Building Safety Act. We've also, when phase 1 recommendation was about having personal emergency evacuation plans, the PACs. The government subsequently decided to not follow that recommendation, and you'll see bits in the press about that at the moment. But we took the initiative to continue with that, and we have offered PACs to all our residents. We're prioritising it initially with high-rise buildings, and proactively working with residents. We have a lot of information, writing to them, communicating them, and that information, where residents choose to have an emergency evacuation plan, is placed in a secure box which the fire brigade can access in the event of an emergency. So we're quite innovative in that, and we've been asked by HQN and some others to do some sort of podcasts and commentary and some promotion about that. We've been approached by the National Fire Chief Council and local government about how we're doing that. Sorry, including the Home Office. In terms of fire risk assessments, we have some legal requirements to do that. We have around about 1,500. They're done in different phases, so higher risk buildings are done annually. We have sheltered properties and hospitals are done more frequently too, whereas lower rise blocks are maybe done every at a lower frequency. We have many programs in train. We've installed upgraded over 4,000 fire doors to the higher standards. We've installed wet risers and sprinklers, and many safety initiatives, which is shows that we're working above what are the minimum standards required. Just a little bit about the Building Safety Act and Fire Safety Act, which came in this year. The full implementation of those is a period of sort of amnesty while we're doing that, but we are ahead of the game. We have safety case files for all our blocks. We have a dedicated building safety manager. Even though that was taken out of the Act, it's sort of it's taken out of the Act, but the responsibilities and the accountability still remain. So we have that post, and it provides detailed plans for all our blocks in terms of evacuation plans, their structural makeup, their fire strategies, etc. And as part of our process, we have identified some buildings which do have small amounts of combustible materials, and there are plans in place to remove those, and they are safe in the interim. This is just to ensure we're operating to the highest standards. A little bit more detail, we have a minor fire safety works team, which again is quite unique. So we have our own in-house expertise that can do things like compartmentation, fire stopping, install kitchen doors and fire detection systems. I mentioned that we've installed over 4,000 doors, and the number continues to rise. We've installed sprinklers at Edward Woods and Drake and Shackleton. We're just starting in Michael Stewart House and looking at other blocks as part of our future capital strategy. We've also introduced evacuation alarm systems, which are in the process of being commissioned at the moment, which again is very unique in the country, which allows the fire brigade, should they choose to move from a stay put to a sort of phased or simultaneous evacuation at their control, which again makes us very unique in the borough. We've also introduced new dry risers, so these are the pipes which run up tall buildings, which the fire appliance allows them to get the water to the fire in a more efficient way and quickly. And we've also introduced wet risers. So we're introducing wet risers into our blocks, which are over 50 metres high, to ensure that there is the flow rate and pressure to put out fires. Again, operating above minimum standards. It's got shown the other areas that we do in terms of health and safety, and then Legionella and water tanks and communal water tanks. That is an annual. It depends on the nature of the block, but there are many that's a minimum annual check. We have asbestos program, so again that is sort of surveyed annually, and again we also have a lift specialist safety team. We're unique, having our own lift engineers. You'll see there the lists collectively do over 21 million journeys per annum. We have excellent performance, and that's in terms of keeping them running. We have our lifts have sensors on, so they're monitored via the cloud, so we can get emails as soon as they break down or there are any faults on them. So collectively, we do around about 30,000 plus safety visits and checks per annum, and all that goes on sort of quietly in the background to make sure that residents are safe. I said I'd touch on repairs.
Sorry, Richard, can we just talk about that work first?
Yes, it's the same. Yes, yeah, the same presentation, but
you want to push on?
Sorry, no,
please. I thought you were going into a second.
No, it's the same. This guy, and
okay.
I've got another one on capital strategy after. So this is just a little bit about our current position on responsive repairs. We've come there's a long way we've come, and there's obviously a long way to go. But a few initiatives that we've introduced are a dedicated damp and mould team. With a report last year by the Ombudsman, and post that we introduced this team which proactively, as soon as their case comes in, from either being identified as through the stock condition survey or through our call centre, it goes to a dedicated team. We give you an overview there of roughly the number of repairs that we are receiving per month, which is 4,000 a month at the peak, and as we go into winter, that naturally goes up with increasing leaks and mould complaints. And that gives you sort of an overview of the idea of the scale of the work that goes on behind the scenes between the repairs contractors. As well as the general repairs, we have the main contracts such as the gas, the electric etc. goes in the background, and our DLO, which does the communal areas and many of the roofs on our bigger buildings, and they complement the repairs and services. The quality of the service from our main providers.
it's got a shaky start, mobilised during the pandemic, etc. But that said, the quality of the response was initially poor, but that is starting to improve, although that maybe not felt immediately at the moment. But a significant amount of investment has gone in there. With Morgan Singles, we sent a contractual notice back in August requiring them to fill some service improvements. We've done some commercial arrangements to improve the contracts more sustainable. And so a greater focus on managing those contracts. Here's some performance figures to give you an idea of. We have hundreds of KPIs, but some of the key ones for residents are, appointments being kept. If you're taking a day off, make sure that the contractor turns up. So over the months, we've pushed, and that's now around about 91%. The KPI of 97%. Same day fix is around 79%. You'll see the time to complete routine repair there is way it's clearly unsatisfactory, but a lot of work is doing that to reduce that. Some of those figures are skewed by old data as we close down cases which are very old. It skews some of the figures, but it is an improving position. And the percentage of emergency repairs done within the target time is at 93% at the moment. The satisfaction levels from residents sits around about 65% at the moment for the main repair contractors, and 92% for our DLO. So a good satisfaction rate from the DLO, but they're also not doing the same volumes that the repairs contractors are. It's been a big shift in tackling complaints. It doesn't mean that the complaints reduce. We have overall, if you take the volume of our repairs, the complaints is below the target. But what a key issue is with residents is dealing with them being overdue. And historically, that's been a big issue, but we have now significantly turned that around so that even when we get a complaint, it is dealt with effectively in the target time, and we're operating at no overdues at this moment in time, as of today. So just to end on that bit, there's a big drive and focus on contractor performance. We're doing the annual reviews at the moment, and that's looking at their KPIs, their performance, but also about the contractual terms. So when they sign the contracts, so we're looking at working a different landscape. We know far more about our properties now, the type of repairs. So a traditional repair of fixing a tap or replacing a kitchen cabinet versus hacking away a plaster, doing the drainage works, etc. So we've separated out those type of complaints. We've brought in specialist contractors. So we have so it's not just with traditional leaks, but where we have pipe work, which is in the buildings, and simply because of its age is rotting away, tracking it down, hacking out. We have specialist contractors doing that. We've increased the number of contractors who specialise in doing voids, roofs and drainage. We have proactive works going on across many estates such as White City and Clematley, and going to Edwards shortly, looking at the drainage soil stacks, proactively tackling those which haven't been done for decades. So there's either unblocking or replacing cast iron pipe, which is corroded within the buildings, and these are the things that lead to to repairs and tackling those complex cases where we think we've fixed the leak but we haven't, and it's trying to track those down. So it's a significant amount of work going into that, but it obviously takes time to filter through. And the last bit is about aligning this plan with our capital investment programme, and I'll touch on that in a little bit in a separate presentation. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Can I? Thanks. Thank you. Can I ask for a couple of things there? The one thing that you just touched on was the time to complete. You said the figure was slightly out because it included historical issues. Is it possible to get a figure time to complete that excludes those, so we can see a realistic view of the running rate on that, please?
It is. It's quite complex to segregate. And then give you we know that around 50% of the complaints, the repairs that we receive are done within around about 8 to 9 days. Those are what we call routine repairs, and the idea is those routine repairs should be done within 20 days. The other 50% are where we're finding they're more complex, and what we're trying to separate is out is where we're doing a lot of work and with the contractors, and they've brought in more subcontractors, is where those works are far more complicated than was envisaged. So we're tracking that all of those where we have old cases which have been going on for quite a while. When they're resolved to the satisfaction of the resident, that closes down on the computer, and then that sort of skews the data. So we have we have a relatively accurate data, but it's quite hard to disaggregate each individual case. What we can do is in the future is present that changing picture, and also you should see the 35 days because of the resources and the investment that's gone in. So as an example, Morgan Sindles, as part of our improvement plan, have brought in the target is having 61 operatives on the ground, but they've also not only just brought in 61, but over the last month or so, I've replaced 20 of the ones which weren't operating at the standard or the quality that we expected. And they've also brought in an excellent manager, which is again is the key part of delivering at the contractual end. It's having that expertise, commanding the ship and the operatives. And so it's taking a bit of a time to turn around the oil tanker, but it's not just having the number of operatives, it's having them at the right level. And the same applies to the subcontractors, where we've given more enhanced commercial terms, and they've brought on a better quality of subcontractor. But we are working in a difficult market in terms of trying to get people. We had it the same ourselves. We onboard a surveyor, we give them very good market rates, and then a few weeks later they get a better offer. So we are competing in a very difficult market at the moment. But there is significant investment on both sides, and it is making a difference. We could tell that, but it's not the speed that everybody would like.
Thank you. Members, does anybody have any comments or questions? Councillor Orford, would you like to?
Yes, I've got the slightly scattergun because you covered so many points. Again, I wish it had been a written one. The peeps for the sheltered housing. I can understand for the high rise, but what about the sheltered housing, which there are more vulnerable people in? Are you putting a peep plan in for them, or what is happening
So
there?
we're offering peeps to everybody, regardless of you live in a ground floor property, etc. And we're working our way through in a proactive manner. So written to everybody said, if you want one, here's a number to contact. But we know that we have to be more proactive in that. In terms of shelter property, that everybody has always had what's called a person-centered risk assessment. So you look at their individual needs, and then and we assist the sheltered staff, and every 6 months, or if obviously it changes sooner, that the person-centered plan is reviewed, and if it needs to update because of change in their circumstances, then that goes into what's called a PIB, premise information box, which is at the front end. Sheltered properties have a different alarm system. It all goes through care line. It's all interlinked. It goes straight to So
I understand them.
Yeah.
No, but
So there are individual. The policy at shelter is still you stay put. But when the fire brigade arrive, they know where to go and
who is the most vulnerable?
Yes.
We've always had a running asbestos program, haven't we?
Yes.
I mean, how is it we've still got asbestos if we've been going regularly? I mean, I can remember how many times asbestos inspections have been. Why do we still find we've got asbestos?
The asbestos is inherent within all our buildings, and across London there are 5,000 deaths per annum relating to asbestosis. It's in the concrete, it's in the ceilings, and asbestos is always safer to leave it where it is if it's in good condition. So the idea of the survey is that you're constantly going back and saying, is it still in good condition?
That's the reason for your That is why so you know where where it is. But
Yes, but we continue to improve that because we don't necessarily know what it is behind the door of every property. And it can be quite, you think that you've done, 95% you make a general assumption, but then you get to the last one and it's slightly different. So as we do voids, as we do work, we have an asbestos register, a contractor goes somewhere behind a panel, and it hasn't been there, they've never been there before, and there's no records, then when we get a surveyor comes in and does an intrusive study. So it's an ongoing reiteration of the surveys.
I've only got 2 more there. Again, there's gas, well, actually 3, they come together. One is, of course, I totally support your gas safety and the fact that we must have 100% compliance. Preparing our past history, we really must have 100% compliance with that.
No, yes, I mean, the boilers are obviously a lot safer than they were a decade or 2 ago, but also there's a legal requirement to have a CO monitor in properties, which is recent changes. So all our properties have carbon monoxide monitors in the property too. Right,
I think I'm now going on to Morgan Single, which I'm very dubious about. Now I know that they took over from United Friendly, didn't they? When United Friendly were not performing.
United Living, yes, yeah.
United Living, sorry. But frankly, in my experience in my part of the ward, they really are not doing a very good job. I know you say you've got new people, but they do need to improve considerably.
That's correct. When they took on the lot, they were performing well, and that just sunk them. They took it on in November, which is not ideal time, but it's just the circumstances because we have the seasonal peak. There was another lockdown. They lost their manager. Unfortunately, the new manager they had in sadly had a past heart, but then they got an ally now, and he's very good. And he's part of a big team, and they put a lot of senior management resource in there, a lot of investment, but it is taking time. And we're working with them in the annual review now about what we call the exclusions, because originally there was just simply they would go there and think that their stock was in a particular condition, it would be just an average level of repairs, but what they're going there and finding actually there's houses flats need a makeover, and that's far beyond the skill set of the average person that's turning up. So that's where we brought in all the specialist contractors to start backing that up, but it's taking time, but we are driving forward. Mark and myself, we meet with the managing director on a weekly basis, and we're driving that performance through. But there is a plan and there is progress being made, and it is going in the right direction. So the point where we thought it was actually we'd lost control, but actually it's in control, it's stabilized, and it's improving.
I mean, I'll just finish all the 2 things. I mean, I realise I have the difficult cases which do not get resolved, and we need to go around in a little circle with the same cases going round, which I've raised with you. And the other thing I think gets lost is disabled lifts. We don't seem to be able to deal. Some of our disabled residents have lifts going into their properties. Now, we can't control those. I mean, what I mean by that is that they go wrong because they're on the outside, they have more access to the environment, and these will break down either because regretfully a carer's turn the battery off, or they do all sorts of strange things. And you get a resident, this has gone on with one particular resident, but it's not only her, is that they are stranded for maybe 5-6 hours outside their house. And since they are wheelchair bound, they are stuck. And we don't respond at all quickly.
We have 216 passenger lifts, which are all automated. When people have individual lifts put in through aids and adaptation, it's put in by a different company, and then we take over managing to inspections and checks. Where individuals have particular needs, then they can sign up to care line, and they can be contacted.
But if they're outside the house and they can't get in,
well, it's difficult depending on each know, I think there's one or two unique cases in how they've been designed and set up, and I think, you know, for those particular cases, you know, we're fortunate we have you know, people that run it are actual lift engineers, so they, you know, they design all our main ones. So they are working, and they know that there are, you know that particular cases constraints on the design. So they're working with those. But anything where somebody is at risk of you know, falling over, etc., we do work with you know, aids and adaptations to try and improve their response. The same with you know, fire, etc. Where you're stuck. But,
Well, thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. Well, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Yeah, only just to reiterate what I said earlier, if there are specific cases that you want to mention to Colette, we'll follow up on those. Specifically, because I think I heard you say that you've got a number of sort of long-standing cases.
Oh, yes.
What I've witnessed in a couple of months is capacity commitment in Morgan Sindel, which was possibly planned in the summer, but that's coming through, and because I've got no history of how it was set up or why they put on lot 2 or who, you know, I'm just looking at, can they do it? Have they got the capacity? Have they got the willingness? Are they incentivized enough? Is there a commercial conversation going on? Are we penalising them if they're not delivering? Some of these conversations at the moment that Richard talked about as part of their annual review are ongoing. They're not quite concluded. They are commercially sensitive, and we've not quite come through. We hope to come through to conclude those negotiations within the next month. So I'm hoping when we come back to you, we can not only talk about the improvements that have been delivered through the previous raft of changes that Richard has described in his presentation, but further things that we want to do over the next couple of months. But you know, if people have been waiting a long time on specific cases, please let Colette know.
You let Mr. Buckley know.
You know, Richard's got a portfolio of cases that he personally is getting over the line. I've got cases like, well, I go to Steve in the community.
Thank you. Thanks.
We're doing a lot of work on this.
Thank you. We are beginning to run out of time here, so can we just?
Can I get more questions?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So, sorry,
But if we could keep this section to 5 minutes, that'd be useful.
Sorry, I had built up just a small list of questions. Sorry, Richard. It's nice to see. Nice to see you. And I'm sorry, because of not having an advance on what you're going to say, my questions are a bit on the fly, so they're probably not as well worded as I could as I would like them to. So just going back quickly as a point of information on the carers. Carers cause problems in the repairs system, and that's something that needs to be looked at, because their efforts to try and help actually cause some real problems with the reporting of problems and that, and I'll give you cases stuff later on to do that. Now, contractors and inspectors, now everybody from an aircraft factory to a coal mine knows how to fiddle the inspector. It's the old one in the book. That's why we tend to not use inspectors as opposed to a more audit-based system, so that we're checking against an audit system rather than a case-by-case inspection. And quite often our normal specification is being changed, whether for valid reasons or for not valid reasons. It gets changed, and that's not documented. So the work is specified and it's done, and the inspector comes in, yeah, the tap works. It's put in the wrong place somewhere, and it's behind the thing, and that's slipping through. So I'm going through the questions as fast as I can.
Yeah, if you could, thank you.
The asbestos is really an important issue, and it's sort of sorry to throw in, but I do have a background dealing with asbestos and that. So when we go to do works on certain sites that we've identified, we do have to do a new asbestos survey, which is to reinforce what you're doing, and there is no way, there's just no in hell around it. We got rid of one of our contractors. I'm glad we did, because they were milking it, and we have to watch that we've not got contractors who are taking the mickey out of us and dipping our pockets on the back of that thing. So I've got 2 more questions left, Chair. So we talked earlier about shaping our priorities and shaping our policies, and the Residents Action Group, which is a great part, but I can almost picture most of the Residents Action Group. And they do tend to come from, as you quite rightly said, from the tower blocks and from the bigger estates, and there they can bring a collective problem for a collective solution. But we've always been weak, and we're even weaker now since we changed the structure of the residents' engagement through the TRAs for gap sites and street properties. So we've got tower block solutions being arbitrarily rolled out onto small properties and to small gap sites and to street properties, despite it being and that's kind of a problem that needs to be dealt with quite structurally. So it's not a quick fix, but it doesn't. Now, going back to the starting point, when we started talking about safe housing, if I can just, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to go to those down to there as well. I think it was, I think, the 2004 Housing Act that requires safety in housing. I'm not talking about our specialist housing or our sheltered housing, just general. So, and in that is tucked an appendix, I think it's appendix 2, but please, I might be quoting the wrong year or the wrong, and that gives a comprehensive set of risk assessments so that you then get a score per property, and you score it higher if it's a 60+ old person. If you got children on a certain age, it scores and each room and that, and then that brings us to the electrics. So council electrics are no better than anybody else's, and the legislation hasn't been designed to say, oh well, councils, you know, they know what they're doing. It actually relies on that risk assessment system, that the councils have got a risk assessment system for the electrical safety and the electrical safety systems in place, rather than just the arbitrary stuff that's not done by private landlords and private houses.
A question.
So yeah, there is. I'm obviously out of time, so I'll stop there. I'm sorry, Joe. I only had 3 minutes, and no, it's too.
We've got another item on the agenda, and I'm keen that we don't miss it out completely.
Well, I think quite a long time.
Councillor Morton or Councillor Sadiq, do you have any questions?
I have a question. I can wait for the question. Thank you very much, Richard, for your comprehensive part of the first and great work and your presentations. I will quickly ask you the questions. You know, I'm not going to be long. And I understand that you're on the top of the gas, electricity, and overall safety. That's first part of your presentation saying. And the second way you said, in terms of repairs, I understand is a great challenge for everyone. And then you said the standard timing is 20 days, and some of we are doing in 35 days. Do you have any strategy or tick boxes or in place where someone is calling, for example, vulnerable resident or the children involved or health issues there? And how do you deal with them within the day, within the 24 hours, 48 hours, or just going to the 35 days?
So there's a number of KPIs. One is we have a 4-hour one for emergencies, 24 hours.
How do you categorize them? Like you can stop them from not putting to the like 35 days, you know, the block.
Those were our emergencies. And then based on when they call centre, they speak to the residents, the families, and they ascertain if there are any particular needs or requirements of those individuals, and they can prioritise that. So the 20 days is for, you know, what we call for routine works, but there is a priority mechanism. There's also, for example, with our damp, mould and leaks team, we have built a a system with our doctor of public health, and where we've run through all our damp and mold cases, for example, we've run through the lists and the NHS. So we had a NHS and DPs can email us directly. So we have a fast track system and a prioritize both until we are something out with the most vulnerable of people. We have that pathway in place. But there is, no one is left, or there'll be interim measures. If someone's got to wait because it requires plastering, etc., then we gift dehumidifiers, we put in temporary solutions, to make the properties, or if need be, we will decant residents if the property is such that it requires. So we have all those systems in place, and they are used daily. Jerry's team has gone is keen helping with that process in terms of decants, etc.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Conscious that we are approaching the 9 o'clock mark, and I don't want officers to stay here for too long. So I'd like to move on to item 7, developing our capital works programme. Richard, I think this is you presenting again.
Yeah, so apologies for listening to me again. It's not
Yes. Going through his computer stuff. Can I also resubmit my questions in writing and then get a written answer to them?
I think that's a really good idea. And part of the issue here is that we didn't have reports to kind of to pre-read, which is making the meeting go longer than it would otherwise. I think it's so important that we get reports in the future.
And happy to answer any questions after. So
Thank you.
I'll whiz through this, and we won't do it justice, but again, I can ask other questions. So I was asked to touch on the capital strategy, and my area and my teams to focus on the actual the delivery elements. But in September 21, over £600 million was agreed in terms of our existing stock, and the remainder of the sum is in terms of a new build. And you'll see here a breakdown about how that was proposed, that money is used over the next decade to improve the existing housing stock, which is a unique investment which hasn't been historically done. So looking at the investment program, there are colleagues working on the background and drafting up a detailed asset management strategy, and they have support from consultants in terms of looking at retrofitting, which is a key part of the climate change agenda. Looking at the historic asset management information that we already have, so we know that the life cycle of many of our buildings and the building elements. There's a stock condition survey which is going out, and that partly addresses the Councillor Alexander's question about HHSRS in terms of the Cat 1 and Cat 2 under the Housing Act. And there are many other feasibility studies around particular areas, such as we're looking at heat source and air source heat pumps, etc. So there's a much as part of carbon net zero, how do we move from gas to electric, for example. So a lot of work is going on in the background to develop the strategy, which we formulated and for next year. Many of the challenges we touched on in the other report, but the key thing is that decades of sort of use the term underinvestment, because for example, when they did the decent homes program, they replaced all the kitchens and the bathrooms, but didn't replace the pipework and the drainage that goes with it. So a lot of the repairs that we deal with are from that sort of inherent absence of a planned preventative maintenance. There are additional requirements post the Grenfell tragedy. There was the impact of COVID and Brexit, and in terms of inflationary pressures and access to resources and materials. But in terms of stock condition surveys, so far we've done over nearly 3,000, and most authorities or organisations, when they do a stock condition survey, they take 10% and extrapolate, whereas our ambition is to do all properties and assess the true condition of them, and that allows us to deal with individual individual level rather than as a strategy. And you'll see in this slide, I'll just give you an overview of where we've been to date. And you'll see the aim is to complete the whole borough in about another 18 months. In the slides. It takes a long time to get into every single person's house. So there's also I'll touch on procurement. So once we decided what needs to be done, a particular project, a particular estate, for example, we have to develop a procurement strategy. That goes onto a key decision list, and then depending on what the estimated sum of those works, that defines in the contract standing orders, which is part of Hammersmith's internal governance, about the strategy and the timeframes for the procurement process. In terms of the procurement strategy, what we're looking at is how it will be delivered and by whom, and in terms of consultancy, the methodology around the contractors, etc. We go into the next stages is the scheme preparation. This is where we work with residents and the consultants to do the detailed specifications for particular schemes, and many of which we're doing at the moment, and I'll show you those shortly. After we've completed that, we then go out to tender, and it depends, how it's done, whether it's done through a framework or going out to the wider market. Once that tender is back, contract is awarded, and we then start the mobilisation phase. So this is sort of a high level overview of the process. And as you've seen in the blue and the yellow bars in the middle, that the average time for that is around 40 weeks to 50 weeks for that process to take place. It's not a short process, but there's the legal requirements. In terms of resident engagement through that process, during the scheme preparation, we'll do some soft consultation. So we're doing that at the moment, for example, for West Ken Estate and Lynn Acres, just a couple of examples where we set up meetings, face-to-face meetings with residents, and say these are the works that we're proposing to do. Are there other issues that you want us to take into consideration? Then at the tender stage, we send out Section 20 notices to leaseholders. Again, we'll be consulting with residents in more detail about what's in the tender. And then finally, once it's been awarded to the contractor, we will then, again, the residents will meet the contractor before we actually start physically on site. So I'm whizzing through this. You'll see some of the schemes that we're doing at the moment. So we're out in Cheeseman's, there are a number of street properties. We're on the phase 2 of the Sullivan Court. And these are mainly around the external fabric of buildings, windows, doors, roofs, etc. And are key to improving the weather tightness of the properties, walkways, etc. We're also working at Edward Woods, these are fire safety works. And then you'll see a number of here, which is the spandrel panels, which again, fire safety and complex voids. So these are some of the voids that we talked about earlier, the ones that, for example, have been sitting around for 2 or 3 years or longer, which need significant investment to get them back available. These are the projects which are now scheduled for the future. So the projects I'm talking about here, there's only sort of a sliver of what needs to be done, but these are the ones that we know are in most need and already are programmed. So we've got Becklow and Emlyn Gardens, Chaircroft, and the West Kensington Towers, for example, are some of the bigger ones that we'll be taking forward next year. These ones again are more around fire safety and the spandrel panels, and you'll see at the bottom is West Kensington. Again, these are some additional climate change programs. And then this last one slide here again is further works which are programmed. They're part of 22 schemes which we hope to deliver around £60 million of work between 23 and 24. As I said, these are all based on our knowledge to date and the asset management surveys, and an understanding of the life cycle of the elements, for example. For example, Linacre, the windows are over 30 years old and need to be replaced urgently. There's a significant amount of work to be done. We need to do this work across the whole borough, street properties, low rise as well as high rise. And these are integral to maintaining the future life of our stock, but also for reducing repairs. And I'll skip on to the last bit, is and we'll do this more justice in the future with colleagues around about decarbonising programme. We have consultants out at the moment looking at a retrofit strategy. And part of that is looking at the archetypes that we have, working with colleagues in planning about what can be done to in terms of insulation, etc. And depending on the archetypes and whether in conservation areas, but also aligning that with there are other programs of work around compliance and maintaining structural elements, etc. And also we're aiming at part of having the strategy in place so that we can take advantage of any grants that come up. Most of our properties are the criteria, not at company for government criteria, is often to be anything that's below grade D or below in terms of EPC, that's the energy performance. Whereas most of our properties are actually EPC C or above, thereabouts. But there are a number of street properties which fall into that criteria. So again, we're seeking government funding and taking advantage of that at the moment. So apologies, Chair, for whizzing through that, but I'm conscious of the time and not doing it justice. But
thank you very much, Richard. Can I just ask you, you talked about how we had another 18 months until we could have finished the stock assessments, but we already have created a programme of capital works, which makes me wonder what those capital works are based on. Is that based on actual need, or is it just something that's from the calendar? It's 30 years since we've had windows, we need windows.
So it's a bit of all of those. So we know the stock, the condition of the stock. So in terms of, for example, the West Kent and Linacre, we know that we've had assessments done already. So we know the windows are in very poor condition. They must be replaced for safety reasons, but also for weather tightness, etc. So all properties can only have an annual programme, but the council's programme stopped for about 3 years back when Mighty was in place, and then post Grenfell, the focus of capital programme was around urgent compliance. And now we're getting back into the cycle. We still need to do compliance. We're getting back into the cycle of routine maintenance. So we know that these buildings, which are the 22 schemes which are posing at the moment, will be the ones which are naturally in the cycle. And we've also done the stock condition survey for those, so we know that there are, there'll be damp and mold issues, and there are key themes which come out of the stock condition surveys, and that will be damp and mold. There'll be windows which lead to the weather tightness and the damp and mold, etc. But what the stock condition survey gives an indication of whether it's isolated flats or whether it's blocked as a whole.
Thank you.
But we have that a lot of information. We know the age of the the infrastructure, so very informed about how our decisions that we've made.
Thank you. I think that's members. It's kind of a question and comments time. We've hit 9 o'clock. Are members happy to just extend the meeting a little to be able to ask questions and make comments to this?
Well, it would be nice, but I think my question will probably go on quite some time. So I suppose I'll have to once again write.
Councillor Sadiq, would you be happy for the meeting to continue?
I don't have any questions. I just want to highlight whatever the work you spotted over there. I saw them slides. The relevant council, are they going to get their email? This is going to happen in their ward, so they can have a casework and they can reply accordingly.
Yes.
Is that going to get the information via email?
So some of that's taking place at the moment. So we will have written to the local councillors and all the residents, the local councils and residents, and will be part of that discussion. So we know we have an understanding of what needs to be done, but when we speak to the residents who have who actually live there, they'll say, well, actually, this is a bigger issue. Can you look at door entry systems, for example, and ASB while we're there? Can you include these while put that into the round of the works that we're doing? So that's going on at the moment. It will start with different speeds, but yes, we write to local councils and residents.
At least they're sitting in the surgery and they know what's going on, whether they're gonna.
Yeah, so a key part of this, and knowing that once you've got the asset management strategy formulated, is people knowing, it might be 2 years ahead or 5 years ahead, but they know that something's going to happen. I think that's where we need to improve upon and have that strategy, so people know where they sit in the future for their homes. And that way, then people think, well, I'll hold on for an extra year. I know that this is definitely going ahead. So it's about that's what we are aiming to get to by early next year.
So can I clarify? Sorry. So you're saying that you're going to have an asset management strategy that can be shared with residents in those estates, in those buildings? So
what I'm saying is, when we individual buildings, it's like a 3-stage consultation process, and we'll go there with the consultants and we'll have a meeting with them. We'll say, we're going to be doing this, and what do you think needs to be done, etc. So it's very sort of like soft. So while we're not sort of telling people it's definitely that you need this window and that's the end of it, we'll be listening to residents, and they'll be saying, well, these are the issues, it's very cold on this side of the building or whatever, etc. In terms of an asset management strategy, colleagues will work on that. So what we want to do for the whole borough is say, this is where roughly you are over the next 10 years in the calendar, so that also that local councillors can see that, and everybody there has a better understanding of what of where issues in their wards will sit.
Thank you.
Can I have a very quick question? Really quick. Do you have a start date for Lineker and for Barton House windows, which have been a long-standing issue, or have you got a programme of mitigation?
Lineker, we're doing the soft consultation at the moment, but I think it's on the slides
for the project.
This is 20, well, it'll be 20 next year. Barton House, I don't know. So
the consultation tonight.
I thought it was, yeah.
Downstairs, upstairs, downstairs. We're on the second downstairs, yes.
But it's just really, we've got a programme date.
Yes, we have. I was at the meeting, it was just an hour before this meeting.
And Barton House?
Barton House, I think, I'm not sure about Barton House, but we certainly we'll take that away and we'll just be able to tell you. I mean, some of the bits that we have, we won't know. It might be, once we've done the asset strategy, it might be in 25, 26, etc. But there's we can deliver 40 to 50 million pounds a year, but that obviously is only a small chunk of the borough.
Do any members have any questions that are more broad questions? No?
Can I just make a point of clarification?
Please, Mark.
Because an asset management strategy tends to inform the priorities over quite a long period of time, and the interlinkages between doing certain types of work and how you do, or what order you should be looking to do it. The detail that I think everybody wants to know is when is the program of work's been done in my block or in my ward, and that will only be hinted at in an asset management strategy, because it doesn't give the dates in terms of within 5 years, within 10 years, and 15 years. What Richard and his team are able to do with an asset management strategy is to start doing the programming work, including the procurement, as has been through in this presentation, which then starts to show you more of the detail over the next 3 years, and then the next phase might be the next couple of years. So you start pinning it down into 2024, 25, or yeah. So don't think that the asset management strategy will give the detailed answers. It won't. It will give more general, general approaches based on best practice which in so doing will ensure that we can deliver the programme efficiently and with value for money, because there's a way of doing these things which is very, very technical, and it's above my granular thinking, but it's the programming work that gives you the detail.
Thank you. Can I ask, there will be the presentations will be circulated. Is there an opportunity for members to come back and ask questions in writing once they've had an opportunity to sit and read through and digest?
Of course, please, yes.
Well,
Thank you.
of course we can. I mean, that is our role to ask the questions.
Just thought I'd capture that in a minute. Councillor Alford.
You know, what is the point of, you know, we should have had these reports with this meeting.
Thank you.
Now we've got to read them.
I understand we would have to have read them before and now
Yes,
we're
we
reading
would
them
have done, and then
afterwards,
we
but
would have maybe
um,
once more.
I think the point's been well made. Thank you.
There wouldn't have been such long presentations if we'd read them in advance, because it could have been encapsulated and then we could have asked questions.
Yeah, by way of mitigation,
Mm.
to have presented what we covered in presentations tonight would have probably somewhere in the region of 16 to 20 pages the report.
So I'm
So
quite used to reading 16 to 20 pages of report. I don't have any difficulty doing that.
and of course, you know, in terms of like further reports, you know, sort of narrowing it down on the capital programme or the repair service, we'll be able to provide you that with that detail in advance.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank everyone for attending or watching tonight, if anybody's kind of stuck with us on the YouTube. The next meeting is the 23rd of January, and in that meeting, we'll be bringing budgets and looking at the household revenue accounts.
HRA is part of the budget.
It is, but I
It's-
believe that it hasn't always been touched on in quite such.
You mean it's been forgotten by the officers and forgot to put the reports in?
So it would be useful to just have in the minutes that we'd like to see the HRA along with the budget.
Officers,
And then the next meeting after that is the 20th of March 2023. I hope it's in everyone's diaries. Thank you so much, Councillor
Sorry,
Siddiq.
it's not, it's just highlighting. If we can have a calendar invite, we'll appreciate that. We can just click that and it's gone to the calendar. It's very easy, instead of asking when is the meeting, when is coming.
That has happened.
I don't think that we have in the past.
Yeah, we have. Councillor Siddiq, I can ask Debbie to resend it to you, but it has, yeah.
I think this-
Okay, hi.
I just want to say to the councillor, there is also Salvan Court, and I was part of the residence commission, and we moved around and came up in the blueprint on how services are supposed to be delivered. Unfortunately, service has gone down. And whatever presentation has been made, it's okay in these meetings, but we who are staying in these estates,
Yeah.
the service is very poor. It's not good enough,
Mhm.
and it begs questions how you can award contracts when you have in-house sort of weaknesses which you should first sort out before you can deal with contractors. So I'm disappointed and I'm here just to listen. I think Hammersmith can do better.
Thank you very much for coming and thank you for letting us know that. For sharing that. Colette, would you mind?
Yeah, I know. I think.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
You know,
All right, lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Bond drinks?
Yeah. Yeah, I am. I'm tense.